Howdy friends, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to convince you to start making compound butters. So I'm outside trying to beat the rain. There's so many, everywhere I look on the property, there's about a million things to do. But today I'm going to be making compound butter, and actually I've got a helper with me today. Kiddo is out as well, and we're going to be making our first batch of probably many batches of compound butters. So what is a compound butter? Essentially, a compound butter is a mixture of butter and fresh herbs. You can use dried in this case. So today we're going to be doing a wild leek butter. If you want specifics on how to do that, check in the description below. Plus I'll post a link because I did a video on that. But compound butters are an amazing way for you to preserve fresh herbs in a way that you can either cook with, bake with, or use at a later time, especially like when it's off season. Wild leeks are around for maybe a month at the longest, not even. And so wanting to preserve that flavor, year round is really amazing. So what I'll do is I'll just thaw the wild leek butter, and then we'll use it if we're, say, making like a steak on cast iron, hi Malfoy. Or if I want to make like garlic bread and use that as my butter. So generally speaking, how do we make compound butters? So when I make compound butters, I like to work in about half-pound increments. And how much herb material you use is going to depend on the herb that you're using. So if you have something really pungent and fragrant, like say garlic, you're probably only going to want about 3 tablespoons of crushed or minced garlic to your half-pound of butter. But if you're working with something like wild leeks, I'm probably going to be using close to, I'd say, 1/3 of a cup, maybe even 1/2 cup roughly chopped. So it's going to be very much to taste this way. And my hope is that I'll actually create a bunch of recipes for you guys, for those who really like measurements. But a good ratio to start with is about 3 tablespoons of fresh herbs, and you can always add more. I do recommend tasting. So what kind of herbs can you use in your compound butter? You can use chives, you can use green onion tops, you can use oregano, thyme, rosemary, really anything that you can think of. And so I'm going to stop yapping. We're going to get to harvesting some of our wild leeks, and then I'll meet you back in the kitchen so we can actually make the thing. So I'm out amongst the fiddleheads that we have naturalized here, the nettles and the leeks. So this is a bit of an adventure not to get stung. But your first step in making any compound butter is harvesting your fresh herbs. So in this case, I'm going to be harvesting some of the leaves. I do not pull the bulbs of my wild leeks because I want this colony to continue to grow and thrive. It's a slow growing plant. And if you pull up the bulb, you've pulled up the whole plant. But the leaves have amazing flavor, but they're milder, which is why I'm going to have to use, that would be my cat again, a little bit of a larger quantity of these. So step 1, harvest your fresh herbs. In order to make compound butter, you're going to need a machine of some kind. I always use a food processor. I imagine you could use a stand mixer as well, but you would probably have to finely chop your herbs first. Of course, you're going to need fresh herbs, and I'm missing an ingredient. What do we need? Butter. One of my favorite reasons for loving compound butter so much is how easy they are. So all you're going to do is take your butter and dump it in your food processor. I usually like to kind of cube it first. Put it in. If you're working with herbs that have a stem, so things like rosemary, oregano, thyme, you're going to want to remove that stem, so strip the leaves off first. If you're working with things like chives or wild leeks, I would just use a pair of scissors and kind of chop it, and I'll show you how to do that. It's really easy. I said this is simple, and I love recipes that are simple, that bring herbs into the home. So my leeks like this, I'm just going to chop. If I was using garlic, I would be crushing it with a garlic press beforehand. Once you have everything in your food processor, you're just going to put the lid on and blend. So once you have your compound butter all blended up, if you used unsalted butter, you may want to add some salt. That's up to you. But it should look something like this. If you've used rosemary, oregano, or thyme, you may have retain more of that butter kind of color and just see flecks of the herbs all intermixed. Now, how do we preserve this or store this? I don't go through a lot of compound butter very quickly, and part of my goal is to preserve butter so I have it all year round. I actually really like using ice cube trays. I used to kind of just take lumps and sort of freeze it. But once I figured out that if I could fill the vessels in ice cube trays with my compound butter, whenever I need some, I just pop out a cube, thaw it, and I can use it. Like I said, if I'm making things like garlic bread, I can use it in a stir fry. It's really good if we ever do a steak or something on a cast iron skillet. So I highly recommend using ice cube trays. Once they're frozen, you can just pop them out, store them in a dish of your choice, label it, and they'll keep in the fridge or the freezer, I'd say at least a year in the deep freeze. So this is a really great way to preserve your fresh culinary herbs that you're going to have growing this summer. Don't forget, you can use anything that you would normally cook with, and you can make a compound butter with. And there you have it. I find about a half a pound of butter tends to do a full ice cube tray. This, of course, depends on what herbs you're using. So for example, when I do this with garlic scapes, they're a little bulkier. I find it fills up the whole tray. But if I'm doing it with something like thyme or rosemary, I might be short a cube or two. But it gives you an idea of how much butter you have when you're done. So I'm just going to pop this in the freezer, and by tomorrow morning, I'll be able to remove them from the tray and then store them in either a jar, a glass container, a Ziploc bag, whatever works for you. Now, if you've got any questions or comments on how to make compound butter, please list those below. And until next time, this is Corinne from Spiraea Herbs, wishing you health, wellness, and happy preserving.